Welcome to It's a Slate of Mind with Alison Haselden. This is the entertainment industry's video podcast where we spark honest, unfiltered conversations within the community about things we're all thinking about but don't talk about enough. I invite you to join my circle of friends, both new and old, as we tackle the industry together. Hey there! I am so excited to be recording the first ever episode of It's a Slate of Mind. This is a project I've been excited about for some time now, and it's been such an incredible creative experience for me to begin to bring this project to life. So, I was really inspired to create this podcast because I've begun to realize just how digitized everything's become in the world for everyone, not just in entertainment. But it's created this sort of digital isolation, a bubble of sorts. And that bubble can really magnify the struggles and periods of confusion and frustration that we all experience. And, social media is great. There's a lot of benefits from it. Technology has helped our world in so many ways, but it also has created more boundaries between us in other ways and more walls that I think sometimes we'd be better off tearing down. So one of the things I found that really helps me with that feeling of digital isolation is chatting with trusted friends who have also been in the same kind of situation and can help you not feel so alone in it and bounce ideas back and forth. So that is my hope with this podcast, is that it will become kind of like a midway between that. Yes, it is using podcasting and social media and all of those kinds of things, but it can serve as our own little tribe, as a circle of friends who are just having a chat and bouncing ideas off each other to kind of make the world feel a little bit smaller. So you're probably wondering, who the heck is this girl? And what does she have to say that is worth listening to? Well, I'll give you the lowdown. I'm Alison Haselden. I'm an actress, writer, and marketing consultant currently pursuing film and TV based in the Atlanta, Georgia area. I'm originally from the sunny Orlando, Florida, where I was born and raised, and very, very quickly began to express an interest in performing. I was that baby who would never stop screaming in the car unless someone sang to me, and I later bossed my younger siblings around to create my own performances and shows. And my parents were amazing. Thank you, Mom and Dad. They got the memo very quickly and popped me into classes and started me out with a print and commercial agent when I was pretty little. The first time I can remember being on a real set, I think I was about 6 or 7. It was a little Disney show in Florida. And from there, I went on to do commercials, print ads, professional theater, and so on. And then in middle and high school, I also had the chance to start dabbling in recorded music as well as a singer and a songwriter. And that's really where I started honing my writing ability. So by the time I was 16 or 17, I was, bouncing between Orlando, Nashville, Tennessee, where my music manager was, and Los Angeles, where my acting manager was. And yes, I was homeschooled for most of my childhood. I was one of those kids, but my parents were awesome and really facilitated my love for performing, and they helped me to, get the most opportunities that I could. And I'm really so grateful to them for that. And I loved it. I didn't want to be in school. I really loved performing, and that's where I was happiest. And so I had a wonderful childhood and definitely wouldn't have traded it for the world. But when I was around 17-ish, I started to realize that though I liked acting and singing, I started to feel really lost as a person. I didn't really know what my why was anymore, why I was doing it all. And I felt like my personal toolbox of emotion and experience was pretty empty, which, both made me feel kind of off as a person, but it made it harder for me to connect to my characters when I was performing. So I decided to take time off. Actually, I quit pretty cold turkey. I really didn't have any intention of coming back to acting or singing or any of it. And yeah, I went to college. I experienced a lot more of life and kind of broadened my horizons and got to make some mistakes and got some experience. I traveled a lot and I ended up getting a degree in public relations and got a job at a traditional marketing and advertising agency after I graduated. So I was there for a while and I, it was something I was good at, but I started realizing that there was a big creative chunk missing for me. I found myself wanting to write again. I needed more creativity in my life. I would be doodling and making lists of ideas in my notebook while I was at work. And I was just all of a sudden, kind of out of nowhere, just struck by this creative need that I wasn't finding fulfilled in my life. So it was just this tug in my gut that there was something else out there, something else coming for me. Didn't really know what it was. So I just let it simmer. I just kept doing what I was doing, but I, kept writing down the ideas as they came and was just going to kind of see, like maybe it was just a passing fad. Maybe it was going to, that gut feeling was going to stay or go. I didn't really know. So I realized after a while and after talking with a lot of trusted friends and my parents and meditating on it a lot, I decided to go back into the entertainment industry. So I quit my job and I started a position as a remote marketing consultant so that I'd have more flexible schedule and hours. And my boyfriend, Michael, and I moved to Atlanta, and here we are. So, it has been a whirlwind of a journey. And it's really interesting for me, having been a child actor and a child performer and taking 5 years off and now coming in both with all of that knowledge and experience, but also kind of starting from scratch. And I think it's giving me a very unique perspective on things as I'm encountering them now that I'm back in the industry. But ultimately, I consider myself incredibly lucky because I do have all that knowledge from my past, but I have actually had a chance to experience the real world a little bit. So that combination has resulted in a much more grounded sense of self. That emotional toolbox that I mentioned that used to feel empty now feels robust, and I have so much more to work with now. And it ultimately has just made me so much more positive and peaceful about this experience than it ever was before. So as I've been coming back in during my years away, I've realized that a lot has changed in the industry, which is absolutely to be expected, and it will always change and evolve. But I found that, talking to actors that I'm meeting and seeing as we're all attempting and often struggling to navigate these changes, it's, it made me feel like this was the best topic. And that, while I'm by no means an expert on navigating it, I have been in some of these situations before and I am diving into them again. So I might as well share my experiences to hopefully inspire and maybe, relate to anyone else who's in the same boat. But what I will say is I don't claim to be any sort of acting coach or manager or expert or this is not the podcast for you if you want to learn how to be an actor. There are lots of coaches and classes out there, and that's where you should go if that's the information that you're looking for. But if you are in this industry and, want to hear some discussion on some of these points that we all experience, but maybe don't feel so free to talk about at public events or at networking events when we're meeting people, then this is a place for you. I would love to see the entertainment industry evolve and become more open, less ego-driven. I think when we encounter one another out in the wilderness out there at events and whatnot, we all kind of put that best foot forward, but almost to an extreme, to where, you know that you met someone and you know kind of what they do and who they are, but you don't really know really who they are. Because I think we're all afraid to show a little bit too much. So I hope this will encourage just to spark those open and more unfiltered conversations than we're used to. So back to digital isolation, which is what I wanted to talk about today. So what is digital isolation actually mean, and what does it look like for us in entertainment? So essentially, most of us use social media, but many of us don't realize how much of an extreme it has become, where we found that we don't actually meet with or have conversations with many of the people that we know. We just kind of scroll through their highlights reel on social media and get the gist of it. And, don't get me wrong, I love social media. And I do think that social media has the potential to be a wonderful way to connect with others, to get to know other people, around the world, and can be a great platform to initiate change, to initiate projects for good. But I find that it's not as equal of a trade for in-person connection and relationship building as many of us might think it is or claim it is. And because of that, it can create this kind of bubble where we can see what others are putting out there, and we can put some things out there. But there's a lack of interpersonal bonding and progression of that relationship, to the point where, it's nice, but it really lacks that extra factor that you get from those in-person communications. And it's also, it can be pretty easy to feel like you're shouting into the void. If you're not in a social media or online community that is very engaged and very active and does take the time to make thoughtful comments or to message you more in a conversational way instead of just, scrolling and liking, then you can feel really alone in that. I know a lot of people, not just entertainment folks, but anyone on social media can begin to feel disconnected, and that leads to a sort of questioning about themselves and others, and discouragement, comparison, and ultimately a feeling of isolation. And I think all of that would be solved if we started approaching our communications more as we would in person. So there's that initially. And then on top of that, not just through social media, but the way that we have meetings and the way that we submit for auditions. So as an actor or anyone in the industry, really, when you're submitting for a job, it's the first round is always online. And that could involve just, being on Actors Access and submitting your headshot and your profile there, or, applying for a job online or mailing it in or whatever. But that initial stage is digital. Then the next stage is going to be, a submission request, which will be a self-tape in almost every situation. And again, that is a tape of you that you film either in your own home or at a taping studio. And that does not require you to physically meet anyone related with the production or anyone else auditioning. That is all on your own. So you send that off, and, then either you'll have another round of self-tapes, or you'll get cast straight from your first tape, or you will end up getting a callback, and that callback will be in person. But I don't know. I mean, for me, at least, when I was leaving the industry the first time is when self-tapes really started becoming very, very normal and very popular. But before that, every audition that I went to was in person. As a kid, if I heard I had an audition, I didn't even think about the fact that it might be on tape unless it was for something in LA. And if I was in Orlando, then yeah, sure, I would send a tape because I just physically didn't live there. But if you lived in the city where the production was happening, then yeah, you would just show up and audition and, do the classic thing, wait in the room and all that. And so this shift now into all digital auditions and all of that is very, very interesting, especially for actors. And I think, I've noticed the difference in a number of ways. So from the business side, there's less opportunity to be in the same room as casting directors. You're just not, because if they don't bring you in for a callback, then you're never going to see them in person unless you meet them out and about somewhere or at an event or at a workshop or something. Whereas before, like I said, if I was called in and they wanted to see my audition from my headshot, then I would get to meet them in the room or at least someone on their team. And that's not the case anymore. So that is definitely, I'd say, it makes casting directors' lives easier, but it definitely, I think, is a negative or can be a negative for us on the other side of the camera. It's also harder, and I know I'm not someone who gets super psyched out about this, but it's harder to get to know who your competition is and who's in your typecast in town. When I was growing up, I used to know almost every girl who was in my same age range and typecast, and because I would see them every week at these auditions, and I would get to know them, and I became friends with some of them, or I would at least know their names or be able to recognize them, and that's still possible now, obviously, because you will get to know people from the callbacks that you go to who are getting called back for a lot of the same things as you, but that pool is a lot smaller than it was previously. So those are two big things in terms of auditioning, I would say. But then on top of that, more from the social media side of things, with less in-person events going on, or I personally think there are quite a few events going on, but people don't tend to go to them as much. And I find it's a little bit harder to find partnerships. So say I'm a writer and, I want to get my script produced and I need to find, a director to work with and a DP and all of that. On the one hand, it's really easy to find various people in the industry online that you could, maybe reach out to and send an email or spark a conversation on social media. But I don't know. For me, I'm much more willing to work with someone that I don't know already if I've met them in person and if I've had the chance to have a conversation with them to see how they think and how they act and how their energy is. And obviously, that's still very possible via online interactions. And you could always set up a meeting with someone after you've connected with them online. But I feel like when the magic happens for me, and instances where I've created really strong partnerships with other individuals in the industry, almost every time it's because I've met them at an event or on another job or through a friend. And those in-person relationships are the ones that end up not only being successful, but being the quickest that I'm comfortable to sign up to work with them on. So then from the other side, from a more personal side, I find with this sense of digital isolation, you just don't find yourself surrounded by other actors as much as you used to back when every audition was in person. So it's kind of like I was saying, because you had all those in-person auditions, you would almost be forced to be around all the other actors, which isn't a bad thing, but, you all were instructed to come to the same place at the same time. You all had motivation to go there. And so along the way, you get to know people. But now, because that's not the case unless it's a callback, and even so, some callbacks are private appointments, so you're not going to be sitting for hours in a room next to people. But for us now, really to interact with other actors, it's not like someone is calling us to an event where other actors are going to be. We have to decide to get our butts up off of our couch and get dressed and go out to a networking event or to go to a class or, a get together or whatever it is. And so understandably, that's, for a lot of people, a lot less motivation than the promise of potentially getting a gig and getting paid. So I find I have to really work a lot harder to get out there and to meet other actors and other people in the industry, rather than before. There was more opportunities for it to happen a little bit more naturally, or because we all happen to be in the same place at the same time. So, yeah. And then on top of that, I feel like it is a little bit harder to connect and find real friends, especially in an industry that is very heavily targeted towards, your appearance and your look and your brand and all of that kind of stuff. When we are viewing a lot of people who we might potentially be friends with first through social media, or after our first meeting with them, all we see is their social media feeds before we meet with them again. That doesn't always reflect exactly who they are. And so, sometimes it does. Shout out to the people who are social media gurus and really their personality shines through on their profiles and they're on there all the time. And those people obviously rock it, and it's very easy to see kind of who they are and what their vibe is like. But for a lot of other people, it's not like that. So I think overall this digital bubble, while making it easier than ever for us to audition for things, has also made it a little bit harder in a lot of other ways to get to connect with other people in the industry. And I think that's the root of what this isolation is. And, this is one of those things where there really isn't a big solution to it because social media and technology is just going to keep going and progressing. And, there's always going to be something. And now that we're in this technologically savvy world, I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. But what I would say and what's worked for me is to do our very best. What's worked for me, though, is to commit and put the effort in to bridging the gap and popping the bubble and going out of my way to organize get-togethers and invite a bunch of different friends from the entertainment industry, whether I know them very well or not. I love to schedule coffee dates with people, to get to know them, or to continue building relationships with people. And I've noticed that, people are really happy to be invited to that kind of thing. And it makes it a little bit easier to connect and to engage and to meet new people that you didn't know before. I know I'm always thrilled when one of my friends from the industry invites me to an event like that. And I think the other thing that we can do is on our social media channels, on all of our technological influences, I think it's important that we go above and beyond to go past the highlights reel, to go past just posting the pretty pictures and the highly edited and curated feeds, and share a little bit more, whether it's in your captions or videos or stories. Let people really see who you are and make an effort to engage with other people for real. Like, don't be a scroller and a liker. If you're interested in something that someone posted, comment, tell them how you feel about it, ask them questions. I think we need to be less afraid of social media and of that connection that can happen through there, and embrace it and use it to meet new people that you haven't met before. But then instead of just being social media friends, invite them out for coffee or something like that. And, it's a work in progress. I still struggle with that myself. It's something that I'm working to be better at. But I think that if we all kind of commit to breaking the notion of digital isolation and popping that bubble, I think we'd all be a little bit better off. So that is it for today's episode, but I am so curious to hear from you. If you're brand new to the industry or you've been around for a while, I want to hear, have you experienced digital isolation as well? And if so, what are some of your personal methods for combating this and, combating that feeling of isolation and breaking the bubble to connect with others in the community? Feel free to connect with me, leave a comment on whatever platform you're listening from, or connect with me directly on Instagram. And I'm always up for a chat, so I want to get this conversation started. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new, and I hope that you'll stick around because in the coming weeks, we have so many incredible guests coming up, actors, directors, writers, makeup artists. We have all different kinds of people from the community, and we're tackling some really interesting topics like opinions and networking and confidence and control and patience. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy it and really enjoy getting to meet some of my amazing guests who are going to be on the show. Well, friends, that's it for this week's episode of It's a Slate of Mind. I'm Alison Haselden, and thank you for joining us. See you next time.